Mr.
Hello.
Axie 44, man. Welcome to Axie Tuesdays on ZyoriTV. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So wow, where do we start? You and I haven't
Yeah.
haven't really talked before. I've listened to the interview you did with YCB. I guess that was months ago at this point.
hmm
I imagine you've probably checked out some of the past Axie Tuesdays and whatnot. We talked
Yep.
briefly the other day for about 5 minutes. I think you're on vacation or something. You're on mobile and you're still giving us some of your sweet time here. So first and foremost, thank you for making time, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
So how you feeling about Axie right now, man? You're one of the OGs on Twitter. You are Axie44, and I guess that 44, does that mean you have the 44th Axie? Are you the 44th Axie account? Hit us with like your little origin story for maybe some of the new viewers that aren't familiar with the great Artic empire.
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm probably one of the oldest Axie community members. I joined February 20th, 2018, and that was like the second day of the pre-sale. Which
Okay.
back then it was
Wow.
it was just really Trung and Masamune in there, right, in the Discord, and I joined there. I found Axie originally on Reddit, just scrolling through Reddit, looking for interesting crypto projects to potentially invest in, and I saw, you know, Ginger, Puff, and Kotaro, and I thought, wow, well, what are these things? They look pretty cute. So I clicked on the link, went to the website, and read through, and was really intrigued that tying a game to an NFT, and the NFT is kind of like the path to play the game. Okay, that's pretty intriguing. So I decided, okay, I'll pick up a team of three. That's probably all I'm going to do, just so I can watch this, see what happens. And then a couple weeks goes by, and finally the option to actually open your Axie was finally there. And the first Axie I got was Axie number 44, which was a double mystic. And from then on, I was just really hooked. I immediately loved number 44. Like, it's just, I thought it was the most badass thing ever. And at the time, I was a 20-year-old college student, so that was already my prized possession from just when I
Wow.
opened that.
Wow. Yeah, and
So
I'm checking it. That's Tetrad. You've got the skull cracker, the mouth, and then the golden shell up on
mhm.
top for the horns. That for the double mystic there. That's a sexy Axie, dude. I love the
Yeah.
color scheme as well. The blue moon on the back. I will admit, confused of all the eyes, it's not my absolute favorite, but
hmm
it does work well with this Axie for sure. This guy's a
Yeah,
beaut.
I agree with that. Confused usually is not my favorite, but with a broken egg on its head, kind of makes
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah. It's man. And I love the leafy too. Very on point. Like great with the color scheme. Oh
hmm
man, he's gonna look beautiful in land gameplay.
I can't wait for that. But yeah, so I made a Twitter account in maybe April or something, specifically for Axie. Before Axie, I had actually sworn off social media. I was like, okay, I'm done with this. This is a waste of my time. But yeah, I decided to make an account dedicated to my favorite Axie, and then from there, I guess crypto Twitter was still in its infancy too, and NFT Twitter not even a thing. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, from there, um, I was mainly just in Discord. I was the first community Discord mod, and I did that for 2 years, which was an absolute blast. I learned so much being able to directly communicate with Trung and Geo, Psych Out, Masamune, and then so many of my other great friends that I've met over the years.
Yeah. As I
Um,
said, that my first thought was, wow, sounds like a stressful job, but I guess back then the community was a little smaller and maybe a little easier to manage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it was much more easy to manage. And I think I never banned anybody except for people who would spam like a link to a sex hotline or something or stuff like
Right.
that. So
Like, yeah, true spam, easy to identify.
yeah,
Like, no context, get it the hell out of here.
it was
Yeah.
clear cut. Um, but yeah, over those 2 years, I just had an absolute blast talking with the team, talking with the community, sharing ideas. Because back then it was bear market blues.
hmm
People were really not happy. At the beginning of the year, Ethereum was like, beginning of 2018, Ethereum was touching around 1,000, and by the end, well, it was down like, I don't know, 90% or something. So people were not having a good time with that. But
Yeah.
with Axie, it was a lot more fun because we were just focused on cute little battle pets, and the team were releasing updates fairly regularly, and everyone was having a great time just brainstorming, thinking about what's land gameplay going to be like. And back then, it wasn't even land gameplay; it was called the terrarium. The land map wasn't even a thing. So we thought, well, when are we going to buy our terrariums? I want to be, giving my Axie a bath and feeding it on the plot, like kind of like a Tamagotchi or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Isn't it wild
yeah.
how your perspective shifts when it comes to crypto stuff, when, being purely speculative versus actually using protocols or playing games? Like for me, DeFi was kind of like that. I've told this story before, but I kind of stopped playing World of Warcraft vanilla because I started doing DeFi so much. I felt like I was just playing the MMO of DeFi as I was like learning about all these new tokens, all these new exchanges. It's like, man, ICOs were nothing compared to this. Like this is a totally different ball game of tokenomics and tweaks, and there's like a bottomless well of information where every day you can kind of just keep on reading and learning until you're too tired to keep absorbing more. And there's something weirdly alluring like that. Like there's a little bit of a high that I'm starting to chase, where I wake up every day and feel like, all right, 8-10 hours with my phone put away, what did I miss? And I open social media and there's, tweets from AUR. Is that Aurora? I always forget what his full name is.
Originally Aurora. I
Aurora,
guess
yeah.
R, but...
like all these other kind of Axie and Twitter influencers, yourself included, server updates, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. But all this is to say, I feel mentally insulated from general crypto price action. I have this general mentality, like if Ethereum goes up, great. All the stuff I'm holding is generally appreciating. And if Ethereum goes down, that sounds like a buy op to me. I'm sort of thinking about all this stuff long. On most days, I don't even really care about the price. For AXS recently, it's hard to not care about the price because it's been so exciting. But, from a broader perspective, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, I feel like, market swings are just part of the game, baby. We're focused on building. We're focused on playing. I'm really excited about this esports future. That's occupying most of my... I don't have time to sweat over, oh, no, I lost 10% today. Who gives a fuck in the broad scheme of things?
Absolutely. I totally agree. And when you're an investor and you're in the stock market and you're just looking at the price of your stocks, you're not doing very much besides counting beans, I guess. But when you're actually in the Axie community, or you're getting interested in DeFi, like I was introduced to DeFi through the Axie community in 2019. Jiho brought up this interesting thing called synthetics, and that was really my rabbit hole into DeFi. And ever since then, it's been another passion of mine other than Axie. But when you're actually using this stuff every day, it's not hard. You don't have to sweat about the 10% correction because that's just market volatility. But when you're actually using it, this stuff's not going away. There's no point to worry about the short term when this is, it's going to change the world, right? And it already is changing the world.
Well, speaking of shorts, the other kind of shorts, I can't believe people are still shorting AXS. And I get it, sort of. These are people looking at technicals that don't understand the utility nature and like why this is so game changing, and how I said this earlier in a meeting, actually, that one of my friends who I suggested when AXS was starting to moon around 10, like, hey man, this might be a smart investment if you're looking for crypto things. I think this one's going to be pretty good. And after it went up, it's like, aren't you happy? He said, yeah, but it just as easily could have gone the other way. And I wanted to kind of shake him into reality, like, but no, how no, the opposite. Like, that's my point, is that it really couldn't have gone the other way outside of some crazy black swan, like impossible to predict sort of event.
Like Ethereum goes down 50%. Well, of course it's going to go down.
Yeah, we don't exist completely autonomously, so it is still relative. But generally speaking, like, dude, this utility is slightly unprecedented in some ways. So it's like I feel bad, but I don't really feel bad for some of these tweets I've seen of people getting liquidated. Like that whole like do your own research, like do your freaking research, man. It's
it's really important. It's really important. And I think Axie is really it's driven by fundamentals right now, and I think it's a real sign of some actual not maturity coming to the market, but the first inklings of it. Whereas back in the last bubble, like 2017 peak up to there, and then most of the last couple of years, most coins probably you can get by as a technical analyst because there's nothing really going on with these coins. There's nothing behind the scenes in the fundamentals driving, like, for instance, 4 AXS per breed having to be paid to the treasury. That's a huge fundamental action right there. What other coins have something like that? And the answer is, well, next to none. So I think most people are still stuck in that more just technical mindset. I'm looking at the price. I'm looking at what the chart looks like. I'm drawing lines, but the lines break down when there's actual real world usage. You can't trust those lines anymore. You can't trust the technical stuff when
the lines also don't account for the current age of like content creation and Twitter buzz and like that Coin Bureau video, for example. I think that had a palpable notice of like, hey, that's a big influx of new wallets coming into the AXS environment. You know, when a giant influencer with 1 million subscribers makes a video that is logical and toned in a positive way of like, hey, I think this is a good project, basically saying without saying, consider investing in this. The lines don't really account for that either. That can create some kind of crazy spikes and turbulence in the short term. And along those lines, I would be curious. I mean, in chat, this gentleman's brought this up a couple times, but I've had this conversation with multiple people as well, and I'd love to hear your take on it. The comparison of Axie's growth specifically with the growth machine that is these scholarship programs, that being compared to some sort of a pyramid scheme. And one of the things I often ask people that say that is I hit them with a follow-up question of ask yourself what the difference is between a rapidly growing economy and a pyramid scheme. And I think people also conflate the words of like pyramid scheme with Ponzi scheme. They're not exactly the same thing. There's sort of like a Venn diagram there. So defining terms is really key in some of these discussions, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, like sustainability when it comes to growing economies and, you know, why maybe the direct question is, why is Axie not a pyramid scheme?
Well, it's a big question to tackle, but I would say, pyramid scheme, Ponzi, you're getting into like the idea of leverage there, and there can be good leverage and there can be bad leverage, right? But I think of Axie like, would you think McDonald's, when it opened and it's opening however many stores a month, or any other fast food chain or other kind of franchise like that, is that a pyramid scheme? And the answer is obviously no. And for Axie, these scholarship programs popping up, these are, you can think of a scholarship program almost as like an Axie sink where, every scholar, those scholars are not, they're not in and out of the door. It's not a revolving door. Once you're a scholar, you're locked in, like, right? You don't want to lose these Axies. And same for the manager. Like, being a manager is great in terms of just, generating income for yourself. So why would you ever want to sell those Axies? So it's not like I don't think there's a big risk of be a huge Axie sell-off right now, because there's such an incentive to hold these Axies. And then also, you have to realize that every player requires 3 Axies, right? So that we have if we go to 2 million, 3 million, 4 million players, you can do the math on the minimum amount of Axies we need. Right. We need more Axies. We don't need less Axies. Yeah. We need more. We need a lot more Axies if we're going to take over the world. And, people are going to hold these things long term. For me, I'm holding it to the grave, right? So, that's if there was if there was some kind of thing where people wanted to sell Axies en masse, then yes, the whole thing could collapse. But I think there's a really, really strong incentive for when you buy an Axie, you don't sell those Axies. And that's only going to get stronger with land gameplay.
But even then, let's say like there was some massive, like multiple whales for whatever reason said, I'm done, I'm selling everything, liquidate it, I'm jumping ship to another game or whatever. Isn't our demand right now still so high that like, there'd be a temporary correction, but we wouldn't just nosedive into infinity. It would kind of level out. And assuming we have this surplus of demand on the other side, like it starts to rebuild again a little bit over time. Maybe doesn't recover completely, but it just seems like now we're at this critical mass where we're even more insulated from the risk of like if AK left the game tomorrow, it would be a hit, but the ship wouldn't sink. We'd be able to patch up the hole, right?
I totally agree. And this is actually a dynamic we've seen multiple times over the years where, and this was before the scholarships and play to earn gameplay, of course, but back when people really, it was a lot easier to get into the Origin market and the Mystic market, land market. We've had a lot of big whales come in and buy up a lot of assets. And then for whatever reason, they don't like what the team's doing. They think the updates aren't frequent enough, which is ridiculous to me, but or a myriad of reasons, and they decided I'm liquidating everything I own, and those assets were immediately picked up by not immediately, but pretty quickly picked up by new entrants who see this as an opportunity. So if there are big whales in the future who want to sell, I think the demand of people looking for entrants into Axie Infinity is more than enough to offset those whales leaving, because who doesn't want to be a part of Axie, right? When you really are starting to understand it, I think everyone wants to be a part of this. So if you leave, there's someone to take your place, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. And one thing that might even be worth just clearly defining when people throw out that word Ponzi, like what a Ponzi scheme is, generally that implies specific fraud of fake returns. So if I'm the guy starting the scheme, I go to my 10 friends and say, hey, all of you give me $1,000. I've got this great investment. I'm starting this fund. You're going to get these great returns, 10% per month. I know it sounds crazy, but it's some medical thing. It's going crazy, right? So then you take that money and you hold it or you do whatever with it, and then you pay back out in that first month and then go, look, you got your 10% return. If this keeps up, you're going to be profitable in no time. And then you onboard some more people and you take a little bit of that money and you just keep shuffling it around so that as you onboard new people, you pay them some returns at the beginning to create the illusion of an actual investment. But then over time, you basically collect up as much as you can. And then when too many people are knocking on your door like, dude, I haven't gotten a check in 3 months. What the hell's going on over there? You rug pull and disappear and just run away with as much money as you have. Then all those people are left holding the bag. That's the general concept of a Ponzi scheme. What I think it's named after that guy, right? His last name was Ponzi. There's different ways that you can do it, right? And there's tweaks on it, but that's the general gist of the whole thing is fraudulent from the get-go. There is no investment. Maybe if there is, it's just a little piece of where the money actually goes. All of it is fake for the person who starts it, that has the intention from the beginning to run away with the money. So, Axie is obviously not that. Not even close to that. Yeah, we obviously
we don't have that kind of dynamic here.
Yeah.
Not at all.
And I think again, I don't have the Wikipedia open, but I think that original Ponzi scheme it started back in the day. It was early 1900s, late 1800s or something. So at a time when it was hard to verify information, right? Obviously didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
There was a lot of misinformation in the news media. You could buy off your way into buy your way into getting a positive article about you in the media, even though you're actually a crook, all this kind of stuff. So that's the upside of blockchain, where it's kind of harder to do that in that way in some ways, because we can see at least what's happening on the blockchain. A lot of those kind of scams, it's a lot more obvious when you look at the smart contracts and see how stuff is structured,
Yeah, exactly. All of this stuff is readily auditable, and you can see are payments going out if it's something where they're promising payments. You don't have to just trust that the SEC is watching over you, right?
Yeah.
This is auditable in real time, and people are always looking at this stuff, always looking for fraud, because they're looking for short opportunities too, right? So there's you're gonna know. It's all on chain. It's all transparent. And Ronin chain, it's just as transparent. So
yeah.
I
guess along the lines of this conversation, though, just to break down these different pieces, because it is a really big question. Maybe a better way to frame it is are we concerned about the sustainability of what feels like a bubble, quote unquote? And usually a bubble is when something grows too fast to the point that the foundation isn't there, and then it starts to lose its momentum, and sometimes that falling knife can be a little bit scary, and you end up lower than where you started because expectations, get too high and then come crashing down.
Hmm.
And it's easy to look at Axie now and go bubble alert. And there's like a little bit of truth there that we're growing really quickly and all these new users. It is bubbling, I would say. But you have to remember there's 3 years of groundwork here of community building and an organic foundation that exists that's really hard to replicate. Like time is the ultimate resource in all things, but especially in crypto. You can copy paste code, you can copy paste tokenomics, you can't really copy paste time. And
Yes.
replicating the 3 years of organic Axie community growth that happened in a bear market, that is really our most valuable asset. And that insulates us to some of that bubbling effect. So I think like your head's in the right place. It's definitely something to think about. And if that bubble starts to slow down, like what does that happen to the price action? I think your head's in the right place. But don't jump to it's a pyramid or something like that. There's a really pretty healthy foundation to Axie, and I think that's why we're seeing so much adoption and confidence from like bigger players that are coming in. If you look at some of the AXS purchases, there are some like 10K plus AXS new wallet holders that have come in over the last couple of weeks, and that kind of stuff to me
Hmm.
is a super positive signal of big player confidence.
Yes, and you also have to think about what exactly is it that's bubbling. And I think what's bubbling right now is we are building a digital nation, right? This isn't just some token on an exchange where that's crazy price action. We are building a real digital nation. I think when I think of digital scarcity versus physical scarcity, to me, the only difference is the physical part, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we are building something real here. It's not just this is more than just price action or some kind of weird token dynamic. This is we are creating real assets, real value, and the in 20 years from now when the metaverse is roaring, are are you going to be the person who yelled it's a bubble, it's a pyramid, it's a Ponzi all the way up? Or are you going to be the person who tried to have a more positive attitude to it and
Yeah.
try to learn what really is going on here? Because I think it's really easy to label things, pyramid scheme, Ponzi scheme, or even at large, oh, that's capitalism, that's communism, that's socialism. A lot of these terms, they're not actually useful terms. You need to really dig into it and think like, what are the dynamics going on here? And that requires personal exploration. That's more than just I'm going to define this as a term that people have used for
Yeah.
a long time. There are new, totally brand new things being built here. So these old world terms, they apply somewhat, and you can look and cherry pick like, well, that's obviously Ponzi, that's obviously pyramid, whatever. But um, this is something new happening, and I don't think
Yeah.
anyone knows for sure what really is happening, right? Because this is totally uncharted territory.
We live in an increasingly complex world where I think nuance is becoming more and more key, and oddly enough increasingly getting lost in translation, just like 100%
Hmm.
pure axes are getting more and more rare. I think in the real world it's pretty rare that we see like pure definitions actually be fitting, pure communism, pure capitalism, pure socialism. I don't know if any of those things really exist. Everything is a little
Yeah,
bit of everything else. There's all these Venn diagrams that exist, and every system is kind of calibrated and built for its own special needs and purpose. And it's just not that simple. Like it'd be great if everything could be for or against, black and white, yes and no. But
hmm
most things exist in that gray area in between those ends of the spectrum.
and
That's
I
just
think it's a
life, baby.
very yeah, and I think it's a very human thing to try to just eat. I'm putting a definition on something, and now I understand it. Where for me, I've struggled with this, putting a definition on something and writing it off. It's something I try to not do consciously, where I want to really dig into it and understand the dynamic instead of just putting my mind at ease, even though my understanding is not there. But
So what
yeah.
worries you about Axie these days? I often find myself trying to challenge like my reality and what I think I know. So at this point, okay, everything's looking good. All things equal, I think Axie is positioned well to be very successful long term. What what could stop us? What are we afraid of? What crucial error do we need to avoid that seems like there's an okay chance that we could perhaps make that error? What scares you right now,
Um, well, I
if
think
anything?
yeah, and well, speaking of bubbles, I think a lot about the Axie price, and are Axies priced too high? Are they priced too low? Because it used to be Axies are like $2, $1, and now we're approaching like, I don't know what's the floor right now, $300,
Yeah, somewhere
and
there.
there's that question of accessibility there. But then on the other hand, you also have to consider if you can buy a team of 3 Axies for $1,200 and you can generate 15,000 in SLP a year, they're also undervalued. So um, I do have some worries on the Axie price, and then also I think AXS wise, 4 AXS per every breed. If this continues, a lot of the supply is going to be locked in the treasury, which is on the one hand is an excellent thing. On the other hand,
It's a balance for sure.
it could cause a real liquidity crisis, supply side liquidity crisis. That's not just a meme here. That's a real thing, and I think it's something the team. Well, I'm sure you guys are aware of it. I'm sure you are, but yeah, I think just dealing with powerful dynamics like that, they always need to be dealt with carefully, and then also just the scarcity of Axies. Like, what if we went on the other foot and suddenly Axies are inflating way too much, which I don't see happening anytime soon? Or what if the team messed up some kind of token generation and the token generation caused a bad dynamic in the economy? I think these are always things to worry about. But on the other hand, over the past 3 years, it's always been clear to me and the team has always made it clear they are highly focused on scarcity. And it's obvious historically when most of the core team came from CryptoKitties, right? And CryptoKitties is notorious for its inflationary supply and how, by the end of 2018, there was something like 1 or 2 million kitties and the player base was dropping off. That's a really bad dynamic. And I think the Axie team learned from that. We saw that happen in real time. We were talking about it back then. Yeah. And I think the team is, I'm sure there will be mistakes made in the future, right? Nobody's perfect, but I think Trung and Psych Out, Jiho, and some of the other guys on board, like Delphi Digital Advisors, we have a lot of great eyes watching the economy and making sure that the dynamics are correct. And there may be some mistakes made in the future, but we just have to trust, that they have the best at heart and in mind for Axie. Like, nobody cares about Axie, the creation, more than the core team, in my opinion. So
yeah,
I just accept that the people behind this, they care about this more than anyone else, and they want to see this succeed more than anybody else.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Big picture in mind always. And I've definitely said this before, but when people ask me, like, what really pushed you over to make this giant career jump, it was the one-on-one conversation I had with Trung as part of my interviews. And being able to see the leadership was not from somebody that was coming at it from a salesman lens or someone who's chasing VC dollars, which is prolific in the gaming, especially in the esports space, probably in the crypto space as well. There's no shortage of salesmen, and there is a shortage of really good builders. And I think my interview with him was like 2 hours long. We ended up going really deep on some Dota stuff and different esports systems. But I walked away with this feeling of, okay, first of all, this guy's like 10 times smarter than I am. Third of all, this dude is super thoughtful, understands economies in games in a way that I truly don't have the brain for. And I just felt very confident, like, okay, I'm in good hands. Like, a big part of Dota is that it's driven by IceFrog, the mysterious anonymous game developer. He's like Dota's Satoshi a little bit. It's not one-to-one, but it is an anonymous figure, and he's been the game developer of Dota for like almost 10 years now. Just the god, the man behind the curtain that is able to balance this game and come up with new concepts time and time again, and somehow continue to make it more fun over the better part of a decade. Really a hard job, and just somebody that the whole community respects and rallies behind, and it gives you a sense of it gives you something to rally behind from a community perspective. And I saw some parallels there the more I talked to Trung. I mean, I've never met IceFrog, but I get IceFrogian vibes from him, if that makes sense. And
that's really cool. I actually didn't know that story. I'm not very familiar with Dota. I tried to play Dota back in the day, and Man, I'm bad at it.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. Yeah, so Dota started as a totally community driven thing. It was
Hmm.
Warcraft 3. They had the map editor that was released as part of Warcraft 3 to make custom games. And somebody had ported this really crappy custom game from StarCraft called Eon of Strife, which had the 3 lanes, kind of set up the 5v5 hero model. And they iterated it, and then somebody came up with Dota All Stars and created all these heroes that were based out of the Warcraft universe. And it was handed off like 4 or 5 times to different community developers. Nobody really knew what to do with it. It was completely in Blizzard's sandbox. And then IceFrog got involved, and he was notorious for being the first one that on the loading screen he set up icefrog@gmail.com. Email me your ideas. And that sounds
Hmm.
really stupid now, but in 2008 or whatever it was, that was like revolutionary. Like, holy shit, this guy's actually going to listen to the community. And
Yeah.
he started building a game that was really amazing. And I don't know why he stayed anonymous. I've heard through the grapevine that it wasn't really part of some master plan, but more that he's just a shy dude that didn't really want the attention and just, you
Hmm.
know, became this anonymous IceFrog guy on the forums and just started working on it as a pet project, and then it slowly blew up, and then 5 years later you have tens of millions of subscribers to this thing, and you're still just IceFrog, and you're like, well, I guess I'll just keep this anonymous thing going. I didn't expect this to happen. So I don't know that it was some big brain like Satoshi style type concept, but the net effect at the end is sort of similar, where here we are coming up on TI-10, and we still don't really know who he is. There's some rumors
Hmm.
out there. There's been some names thrown out, but I've been told that I've been in the same room as him on multiple occasions and didn't know it. Those moments where they go, hey, dude, you were there. He was like right there. You didn't even notice. You're like,
Yeah,
what?
you shook his hand and you didn't even know.
And you don't know if people are kind of just messing with you or if that's actually true. And so, yeah, there is something to be said for that kind of mysteriousness. And, Trung's not totally anonymous, but he's very behind the scenes, right? He doesn't really tweet.
Yes.
He's not like publicly out there. And generally, I do think that's a good thing. I think you want a little separation. There's just a lot of noise on that side, and we need our leader, our big brain, to just be focused on applying that brain to making the best ecosystem possible, the best game possible. And I think he's doing that right now really well. So I couldn't have more respect for Trung and what he's built, and couldn't have more confidence in his leadership overall.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's true. Builders like that are rare. And
Yeah.
Trung. When was the last time he tweeted? Months ago, right? And I think he only has like 1,000 followers or something. But he's not focused on that social game, that reputation. He's focused on, I think, like how to make Axie Infinity the best thing possible. Who else but Trung and the Axie Infinity team could have come up with the idea of a play to earn or of a player owned economy in the way that Axie has? Like, I think it's such a mindset shift from the traditional gaming world where it's all about extraction. And you talked about this before, where it's all about extraction, and Axie is really all about creation and creating things for the community. Like,
Yes.
whenever I talk to people about
That's
Axie,
such a great summary.
Thank you. Whenever I talk about Axie to people, I always really try to impress on them. Like, Axie Infinity or Sky Mavis, the company, they don't sell Axies. They sold the Origin Axies and some AO Axies, and everything else was made by the community. It was community bred. And the land, like they sold the land, but everything in Axie, almost everything is created by players. And when you look at the dashboard and the incredible marketplace volume numbers, daily, weekly, monthly, that's all player activity. That's not Sky Mavis who sold $20 million worth of Axie the game. That's players doing real economic activity, and it's such an incredible. It's a paradigm shift, right? Like, people throw out the word paradigm all the time, but it's a true paradigm shift.
It's hard for people to digest. I've definitely had some newcomers balk at the marketplace transaction fee. They go 4.75%. What? And it's like, yeah, guys, remember, we don't sell anything. Remember, this is all community stuff. Like, we have to get some income somehow, somewhere. It can't just be from the ICO forever. And it takes a little bit for them to really understand this is, I know that sounds high, but it's not when you understand how much of the economy you're able to actually own as a user relative to all of these other gaming communities you could be participating in, or economies rather, not communities.
Yeah.
But it is an adjustment. Like, it is, people keep trying, they come in and try to apply that traditional gaming lens. And I understand it, right? It's hard. I was doing the same thing when I started with DeFi. I'm like applying all of these CeFi principles, and you know, my podcast co-host had to keep slapping me back into reality of like, dude, different foundation, different world. CeFi, DeFi, we're rebuilding CeFi in this new world, but yeah, some things just don't apply. It's they say, square peg in a round hole. I love that analogy.
Yeah. And I think I'm very lucky that I've always been someone who preferred indie games over AAA games, right? I always preferred to find some obscure strategy game on Steam that I enjoy or elsewhere. And then also for traditional finance, like I got started in the stock market when I was 18, but I was never really a fan of it or of the traditional banking system. So for me, I feel really lucky to have, from the gaming side and also the financial side, I'm really a crypto native here in the truest sense of the word. So that's something really lucky for me, and for people coming in with other preconceived notions. It really, I imagine it is very hard to totally change your mindset, because once you have an idea of how something works, it's really hard to change that, and that's just a human thing. It's not like a flaw with any one person. It's just a very human thing to try to change your mind. It's not easy.
And it's also some of the conversations I can tell people want can't you just explain it to me in 5 minutes? And sometimes it takes me 5 minutes to explain, like, you really need to understand the fundamentals of this rebuilt foundation. Like, I was trying to explain to someone, part of the value of NFTs as they apply to gaming is this metaverse future where, if I own this dress digitally, I could have this dress in the metaverse, in Decentraland, or I could put it on one of my Axies. And it's like, that gives it value instead of it being, everything's locked to its own black box ecosystem right now in the gaming world. I have my Valve hats that only works in my one Valve game. I got my CSGO skins that only works in that one Valve game. I got my Blizzard skins that only works in that one Blizzard game. Within Blizzard, there's a little bit of crossover, but not even. It's sort of just like crossover perks.
It's token crossover, really. It's not even, it's barely anything to talk about.
And the response that I got was, well, but that could exist already without NFTs. And I was sort of like, well, yeah, it could, but it would require an unrealistic level of collaboration from capitalistic market competitors that have kind of no incentive to do that. And then so they countered with, well, then what's the incentive for anybody to do that in this new world? Like, why would Decentraland, implement your thing? And that's where I kind of got stumped. Like, I didn't know what to write back in a succinct message. This was texting, not talking. And I was kind of like, because the foundation's different, because the whole ecosystem is built to be backwards compatible with everything else in the ecosystem, so you can build these competing game devs that can still talk to each other. Like, they already speak the same language, so there isn't this huge dev cost that exists now for like Blizzard to talk to Valve, to talk to EA, for all those games to have a shared ecosystem where their cosmetics could all talk to each other. Plus, they'd have to agree on some level of like normalization or some way that, like, okay, well, we have cleats in this game, you have cleats in this game, whose cleats get to be, like, it gets really complicated really quick when everybody has their own black box. In this world, we all share like the gray box that is the world computer, that is Ethereum. So because we have that foundation, the incentive structure is just worlds different. It's not that same my black box versus your black box anymore. And at this point in the conversation, I've already lost them. Their eyes have glazed over and they're like, dude, I don't give a fuck. You're just like gish galloping me now about some random crypto shit. And they think it's like some sort of debate tactic. And then I get frustrated, like, I just want you to understand. Oh my God, please. So anyway, that was a lot. I had this conversation yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind. But it is like a little bit frustrating because I keep getting stuck in these conversations where people engage and kind of say they want to learn, but then they don't actually want to flex the muscle and think about what the implications of the ecosystem at large are, if that's a way to frame it.
I think that's a huge question that's maybe only going to be answered in hindsight, but I can't answer it fully right now. But I think one part of that is where the value lives. And in traditional gaming, the value lives in the studio. It doesn't live in the game. Like, the studio, they own everything. Versus now, the value doesn't live with the studio. The value lives in the NFT. So I'm not sure if that helps the answer, but
that's a good
I think
summary. That's a good way
where
to
the
describe it.
value
Yeah.
lives is a good start, at least.
Yeah. Now that is a good framing. Well, maybe that's an okay segue here. I want to talk a little bit about the YGG token sale that took place earlier today. For those that missed out on what we're talking about in general, Yield Game Guild. Yeah, Yield Games. Yield Guild Games. I know I had it backward. Yeah, YGG, Yield Guild Games. They just released their token, the YGG token. They're one of the biggest play-to-earn guilds in the world, if not the biggest. They're huge in Axie, but they've also got investments in other games. They've built out a really awesome semi-automated scholarship program. They have a 35-page white paper that I highly recommend checking out. They're doing some pretty cool stuff, and they've got a lot of SLP locked up in. Is it a treasury? I don't know exactly what they call it, but they've got some.
Yeah, I think treasury is probably the right word.
Yeah, some form of treasury that's been growing. They have a giant land estate in Axie as well. Yeah, Odin just linked it. So they sold. It was 50 cents per token. It was a Dutch auction on Miso, which is the launch pad for Sushi Swap, and they sold out. It was 12.5 million in 31 seconds, I guess. I thought it was about 2 minutes. I think it ended up being like 5 or 6 blocks worth of transactions, and it ended up going to 32 holders. So very concentrated in who was able to pick up some of the tokens. There were a lot of fans on social media that took to complain. I might have been one of them. After I tweeted, I searched Yield Guild on Twitter and sorted by latest and immediately felt bad because everybody was piling on. So, I wouldn't say I regret it. My tweet was very metered, but I was definitely in the group of people that was psychologically disappointed, of genuinely excited about YGG, believe in their vision and their plan, would very much like to get my hands on some of those tokens just because I'd like to support them, and I think their project is going places. And it just kind of sucks to see, like, sold out before, like, you had to approve a USDC transaction before you could actually make the bid to buy stuff. I didn't even get my USDC transaction in. You got to bid a crazy gas fee.
Yeah, you essentially had to do it in one block, dude.
Yeah.
The USDC approval and the buy.
You needed to automate it. That was what one of my friends said, of like, basically everybody that got this is like rich enough or smart enough to have like a script that does this like through the API or through the blockchain. They're not clicking buttons like you and I are, man. So anyway, sorry, that was a long preamble, but just to get everybody caught up, that happened this morning, just a couple hours ago. Overall thoughts, Mr. Artic. Disaster expected? Is this just a little social media bump for YGG? How do we interpret this series of events?
Yeah, so first I'd like to say I was one of the people who was able to get in. A group of friends and I, we were able to, set up a bot to do this, and we all pooled our funds together and made it in because we knew this was going to be a hot sale. This is the hottest sale ever on Miso, right?
Yep.
So I think everyone was expecting this to be huge, and I know on the sidelines there were a lot of people with a lot of money who were also shut out of the sale. And I can understand why people are very frustrated because everyone wants to be a part of YGG and the incredible things that they're doing and building, opening up the metaverse to anyone in the world, even those without funds. That's just such an incredible vision and incredible, it's transformational for so many people. And we're already seeing that with the scholarships. But what I will say is I think it was to be expected because the sale was so hot that it would go to not many people, but it was actually more than 32 people this went to. There were several of the largest purchasers were actually larger pools of people. So I would say this probably went to over 100 folks. I don't know the exact number, but I think, and it's also important to note that it was only 2.5% of the supply sold versus almost 50% of the supply that is reserved purely for people who contribute to YGG over the coming years. So there's still a lot of opportunity to get involved. But and I think this crypto has always been a story of the krill and the whales, right? And I think I
I'm
think
a
a lot of
krill and I
people,
know it. It's sad.
yeah. And I used to be a krill when I started Axie. I described myself as like a shrimp or a crab, and now I am coming to terms with the fact that, well, over the years I have somehow become a whale, and I'm extremely thankful for that. But I think there's, and this is a generalization, but there are two kinds of whales. There are the mercenaries and the missionaries, right? And I can't speak for the other people in the sale, but for the people in my group of friends, we are the mercenary kind of, or not the mercenary kind of, the missionary kind of whale,
Mm-hmm.
where we're not buying just looking for a quick flip and profit for ourselves necessarily. Although everyone wants to make money, we're doing this because we want to support the YGG ecosystem. We want to support our friend Gabby. I met Gabby probably over 2 years ago now. He's a good friend of mine, and it's been incredible seeing what he's been able to build. Especially, I believe he has 18 years of experience in the gaming industry,
Mm-hmm.
and most people, I believe he's 41. Not to out him, but he's on the older side of people participating here, and it's really incredible to see what he's done. I think he's a refutation of the idea that only the young can understand this. It's not about your age. It's about your mindset. It's about how you tackle this. It's about your stamina, your will to keep going. But anyway, back to the mercenaries and missionaries thing. I can say with high confidence that the majority of the people who bought in the sale, or close to the majority, are people who want to support YGG long term. And it launched at a 500 million market cap. Why would I sell my tokens at $1 billion market cap when I think this company could be $1 trillion company in 10 years? And
Mm-hmm.
that sounds crazy, but I want to support this long term. And for Axie, I think it's incredible what it's doing in the third world for people without economic opportunities. And I want to see that expanded more. So for me, holding the YGG tokens, this is more like I want to be someone who's contributing to the governance. I want to be someone who is making sure that YGG is on the right track. I don't want to be someone who is getting the YGG token and then, damn guys, I just made a 10x on YGG. Like, okay, you made a lot of money, but you didn't change the world. You changed your own world, but you didn't change the world. And I want to see this movement affect as many people as possible in a positive way. So I would say, summary, and the mercenaries in there, they'll be flushed out, but the more mercenary whales you have, the worse it is for a project. You want whales who are supporting a project long term. Whales can be your ally or they can be your enemy. And I think, and Axie is the perfect example of whales being a true ally to the project. Yes. Whereas maybe things like, for instance, internet computer protocol, I think there were a lot of mercenaries there. And, the token has dropped off so much, and it was such a hype thing, but nobody actually cared about it. Yeah. People just wanted to make money, and they sold to people who just wanted to make money. So, I would say I totally understand why people would be disheartened by this and upset, because everyone wants to be involved, but there are plenty of opportunities to get involved in the future. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. So
yes,
there's so much more opportunity to get involved.
I love that framing of whales and sort of the control dynamic that is innate to these conversations of what is the proper balance of centralization versus decentralization. And it's such an interesting thing to discuss. It reminds me of the what's that thing called? The paradox of intolerance. If a 100% tolerant society won't be tolerant forever because it creates opportunities for intolerant people to come in and take advantage of the system. So the only way to have a tolerant society is to have a little bit of intolerance towards other intolerance, because you have to protect your system. Sort of like if you're always a pacifist, then you're just going to get run over. Sometimes you have to fight a little bit and choose your battles. And centralization's a little bit like that, where, if you talk to like a pure Bitcoin maxi, they'll really try to sell you on, how even Ethereum is this like, quote, Ponzi scheme, as we talked about earlier. There was the pre-mine and it's all centralized and Vitalik and all this. And it makes you wonder if sometimes there's a good side to centralization, especially in the Axie space. Like if we were purely decentralized 100% out of the gate, the game would never get built. It has to be centralized around some sort of force and a vision for the ecosystem to be born and have rules and be meaningful. And I like the Axie strategy of starting centralized and trying to hand that off over time to become more decentralized. But, even within the ecosystem, I mean, I was able to buy my Mystic only because Coco has so many Mystics and such a stockpile. He has a centralized force, but instead of just selling them for profit, he sold it to me a little bit below market value so that I could afford it, under the guise of like, hey, I see that you're really helping Axie. I believe that you're long on the project. And I think people like you should have a Mystic. So I've been reserving some of these, that's to me, like you said, that's missionary. That's somebody who has the greater good of the game at heart, expanding the ecosystem, getting assets in the hands of people that he thinks deserve it. That's centralization, that's power. But also, if it was all like that didn't exist, it happens anyway organically, right? People can come in and whales could come in and buy up the whole space. So if you want something to be purely decentralized, at what point does that become paradoxical? Because that makes it vulnerable to centralization through whales just buying it all up. Sort of like this YGG token sale. In this case, it sounds like a lot of the tokens went to good holders. So that's good, but it's still a little scary because it could just as easily be the other side of the coin where you have too many mercenaries, not missionaries.
Yes.
It's super fascinating. I love these sort of paradoxical, what are they, like logical conundrums? It's sort of tangential to some game theory stuff. Keeps me up at night, but it's super fun to think about.
Yeah, it is. And I just want to give Coco Bear a shout out because Axie Infinity really would not exist without him. He was integral in it. I believe he bought up like half of the pre-sale, and the pre-sale, it's important to know, the pre-sale did not sell out. The Axie pre-sale did not sell out. As incredible as that sounds, how could it be? But it didn't sell out because there was not many people who believed in Axie. Back then it was like a war between the Axie guys and the CryptoKitties guys, and most people are on the CryptoKitties side, is for better or worse. But Coco, he's been long on the project for so long, and he's always been probably the number one supporter. So I believe he deserves it. He had a vision that no one else had, and he's seeing that through, and he's going to be seeing that through for, I think, as long as Axie exists, right? So he's such a great force, and it was just so fortuitous for him to have found Axie Infinity early during the pre-sale and not some other whales. Like, I won't name their names, but there are plenty of other early whales, and they're not here anymore. So
I guess that's the beauty of being born in the bear market. It's hard for those the people looking for a flip to stick around for the long term. So I'm curious on a broad level, like how are you on like Ethereum versus Bitcoin? Like, do you hold much Bitcoin, or are you a Bitcoin guy? Do you believe in the digital gold, or are you more focused on, these kind of utility cryptocurrencies? It's such a wide spectrum. I'm always curious where people stand.
So I have no Bitcoin, and I think I stopped believing in Bitcoin maybe 2019, where when I first entered the space, the crypto space, Bitcoin was like the given. It's the given. It's the base monetary asset, guys. This is the number one thing. But and especially when DeFi came into the picture, like I'd already been buying Axies exclusively with Ethereum, and then DeFi comes around, and there's so much more you can do, and Bitcoin can't even interact with this system. Whereas, you can have Wrap Bitcoin or Ren Bitcoin, whatever, but what is the point of that when the Bitcoin chain is not seeing any benefit from that?
Okay, this is the only use case I have for that one is, let's say you bought Bitcoin at 3,000, you're 10x, you don't want to take the capital gains tax hit, so you take your Bitcoin, you collateralize it for Ren Bitcoin, then you can do stuff in DeFi and you don't have to pay taxes on it. And then you get to use your Bitcoin. That's the using it as collateral. That's it. That's all I got. And that is also a pretty weak argument. I'd rather just sell it,
and
take the cap gains hit, and then just do whatever else with it.
And Bitcoin as collateral is basically the only way I see it surviving long term. Bitcoin needs to integrate itself as collateral into DeFi, which I don't necessarily. I haven't seen that happening. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right place, but for me, Bitcoin is just not interesting because I don't use it. And my investment philosophy is, and has been for a while, like, I'm going to learn through use, and I'm going to invest in the things I use. And even before I came to crypto, in the stock market, like I was buying Nvidia and Netflix, and Amazon, and stuff like that, because these were the companies I used. I had an Nvidia graphics card. I watch Netflix. I order off Amazon, so that's what I do. But if I don't have a reason to use it, then I have no faith that other people have a reason to use it, because I like to think of myself as more of like a normal user, although I probably am not. But if I don't have a reason to use something, then I don't really see a reason to own it besides price speculation. And for me, price speculation, if price is the foremost in your mind, it's like you're losing the forest in the trees, right? If you're looking at price, you're just looking around at the trees and running from tree to tree, but you don't know what the map of the forest looks like. Whereas if you're the user, you're learning, what is this ecosystem? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? So for me, I think price follows good things. Good things do not follow price, if that makes sense. So at least for my personal strategy, when I'm thinking of investing, I'm not thinking of the price necessarily. Although I do look at the market cap and make sure, like, am I too late? Am I too early?
Right.
Hard to be too early though. Price should never be at the forefront of your mind, because once it is, your mind is focused on something that is an illusion. I think price is largely an illusion, and it's really easy to get obsessed with it and think about it a lot. And if you're a trader, I'm not trying to talk down on you, but this is just how I personally navigate the space, and I found great success doing that. Not focusing on the price, focusing on the use case.
One key stat that I would say is sort of a supplement to that argument is that it's something like 85 to 90% of the volume that happens in terms of exchanges comes from like 5 to 10% of traders at most, right? Like most of the price action is driven by a very like single percentage of whales that are making really big moves. Some like is like 95% of the trades are from consumers like us, but that 95% is like a drop in the bucket in terms of the total volume that moves on the exchanges. So when it's easy to read Twitter and get really excited about the hype of like, look, here's 1 million people that are supporting this thing. Like, cool, but
actually it's not.
It's actually not as big of a driver as you think it is. So I totally agree. I as I often summarize to people, look at stuff that does stuff. I like things that do things, and I kind of gave up on Bitcoin, I think, once I started seeing a lot of parallels that you see in other markets of like Bitcoin was the disruptor in 2010. It started this whole thing. I mean, we have Bitcoin to thank for creating Ethereum, for creating DeFi, even if the Bitcoin maxis will denounce it now as, some kind of a scam. It's like that was the disruptor that started this whole new financial decentralized world. So I love Bitcoin for that. But weirdly enough, what starts as a disruptor becomes a laggard pretty damn quick as people cling to it and refuse to look towards the future. There was a great Bitcoin, I forget the name of the podcast that Eric Weinstein was on, where the guy, the Bitcoin maxi said, well, but if there's something better than Bitcoin, you could just buy that instead. So what's the problem? That's free market. And Weinstein basically comes back and says, yeah, that works unless you miss the opportunity because you spend the first 5 to 10 years of that product's life just calling it a shitcoin because you refuse to even investigate what it's all about. And I think that's a really key piece of perspective in terms of it's easy to go from disruptor to overconfident to arrogant to laggard. that happens way faster than you think. When you're 20 or 25, you think, oh, that'll never happen. I'm cutting edge. And then you're 35, you got 10 million in the bank. All of a sudden, you're a laggard and you don't even realize how quickly it happened. And I don't know. All those arguments about Ethereum being awful because it's centralized around Vitalik and the DAO and all this kind of stuff.
It's just ridiculous.
I see that as a good thing. I think there's a healthy degree of centralization where having somebody with a vision that can rally people and help guide the ship. Is Ethereum perfect? Yes. Absolutely not. But is it is it like de facto terrible that it has some centralization? I think not. I would argue that it's actually a better thing, and that this like developers, all these other ecosystems. I always tell people, are there any developers? What happened to EOS? What happened to Tezos? Does Phantom have any? Are there any developers? Is anybody making stuff? Does it do anything? Does it do stuff? It all comes back to the utility, the basic utility.
Yeah, I think I saw a picture on Twitter where a Polkadot wallet had 40,000 installs, and the Ronin wallet has 800,000. Like, well, yeah, you know where the users are there. But I think we can take a lesson from Bitcoin, and that is, as you were saying, the longer something goes on, and the longer you believe something without changing your mindset on it, the higher the chance of mental ossification, I guess you could say. So as I think for the Axie community, that's a point of warning that we need to always keep on top of. We need to make sure we aren't stuck in our ways ever, right? We always need to keep pushing forward and keep challenging our ideas instead of just taking things for granted. Like, you can't take anything for granted. You always need to keep challenging yourself and making sure is what I believe 2 years ago still applicable now or not? And I think Bitcoin maximalists are the perfect example of people who the ideas they had 5 to 10 years ago, they've really made sense. And as the ground shifted under them, they didn't change their stance, and now they're about to collapse. So the cognitive dissonance just must be insane with some of these people. So.
Are you at all confident about the Lightning Network solving some of the Bitcoin issues? I know it's been super hyped up for a long time and hasn't delivered, but I've heard within like the last 2 weeks, there's actually been a big push and some major adoption. And as one of my close crypto friends that I trust is sort of like a little bit of a mentor in the space said that, what's a shame about Bitcoin is it does still have some really good people that are trying to build some really good products and like make Bitcoin work. And unfortunately, the reality is that for every one of those people, there's like 10 of the cognitive dissonance type folks, like what I would call almost like Bitcoin cult members that are really challenging to have an actual exchange of ideas with. And I think for people like us, that's just a really big turnoff. And for the folks actually trying to build good stuff, you kind of go, well, good luck to you. Hopefully that works out. But any thoughts about Lightning Network actually being a big spark for Bitcoin to actually be useful for transactions or like actual commerce?
I can't speak to the technical side of it, but what I can say is I'm not too optimistic about it because let's say Lightning is a success, they have to attract people in to use it, right? I think. Whereas, they're Lightning is plugged into Bitcoin. It's not plugged into this larger decentralized financial system. Lightning is plugged into Bitcoin, and then there's a bunch of other CeFi, DeFi-ish things. But long term, I think the overall more decentralized and open permissionless network will win, where you can build more on top of it, and it's more expressive. And right now, that looks like Ethereum, and I think payments is not enough. Like, Elon Musk, he's talking about, we're going to make Dogecoin so quick that you can do whatever, and it's going to be awesome. But
that.
People don't just want to send money around, and we're creating so many new use cases in the metaverse and on Ethereum. Whereas, okay, Lightning can plug into the old world. Like, I used Lightning to buy something on Amazon. Hell yeah. Well, that's cool, but is that something unique to Lightning? And I don't think it is.
It reminds me a little bit of like BlockFi. I don't really know how to
Mm,
classify where they exist on this CFI versus DeFi spectrum. It's like,
I just think of them as fully centralized.
yeah, well, it's not DeFi at all, but it's like wannabe. It almost looks like DeFi, but it's just not at all. It's just CFI with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like, and I bring up BlockFi a lot because they're one of the first ones, I think, that they have a credit card now that pays 1.5% cash back, air quotes, in Bitcoin. It's just Bitcoin rewards. And I've wanted that for so long, but I used BlockFi for a short period, and I really hated the like. All right, I want to withdraw, and it's just like, you know, withdrawing from an old school like Morgan Stanley ETF. You call your guy, they put in a form, they sign it, and it's like you have a person manually approve your transaction. I'm like, well, this is the most anti-crypto. What's the point of my Ethereum being here, dude? You have to. It's
Yeah.
frustrating. I felt like I got, and then as soon as I did that once, I withdrew everything. It was like, all right, yeah, forget about these rewards. Sorry, I'll keep the Bitcoin in cold storage, and then I liquidated it a week later anyway, so that I could buy my
Yeah.
Mystic. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it felt weird, but I can't. I don't really see myself buying more Bitcoin again. So. I think I'm done. I think I'm out on Bitcoin for the foreseeable future.
You've taken that leap. You've turned that page.
It
And
was hard though. I'm not gonna lie. When I queued up the transaction, I closed it at least 3 times before I actually did it. Like, this feels so weird. I had never. That was like this is the first time I've had crypto and not had Bitcoin. Like, it was the first crypto I bought, and I've always had some, always, since I've done anything with crypto. So it's psychological, but it yeah, it was a little change there. You know, I really had to look in the mirror and go, okay, this is the new beginning. Felt
yeah.
good though.
Well, yeah, and it's gonna feel a lot better. Like when you're not thinking about Bitcoin anymore, that frees your mind up for so much other things. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's awesome.
that's totally true. All right, well, we've been on for an hour, so maybe last question here. Any thoughts about any competing games? And I asked this because I was just listening to an interview with one of the other blockchain games that hasn't been released yet, but that has been in development for a while. You know, there's been, per usual, right? You get all this hype going that attracts the fudders on Twitter. A lot of people saying like, well, Axie's not even fun. Just wait until our game that's actually fun gets released. To which I say, I don't know, man. Everyone I've onboarded in the last couple of weeks seems to be having a lot of fun. A couple of them are like literally pro Dota players, and they're having fun, like min-maxing stuff in the arena and playing the economy and, you know, learning about breeding and stuff. I objectively think Axie is a pretty fun game. Could it be more fun? Will it be more fun in the future? Absolutely. I mean, it's a freaking
Yes.
alpha, so it's not close to done. But like, binary yes or no, is Axie fun? I say yes every single time, just as a general statement. Any thoughts
Yes.
about competing games or like just that general FUD in general? I'm not going to lie, it caught me off guard. It also makes sense because in crypto, everyone has a vested interest in whatever they're doing. So if you're an investor in another crypto game, then, you know, you have like a vested interest in FUDding the really popular game. Not saying that's all FUD, but there is some weird psychological aspect to that. So yeah, just any thoughts there? Are there any like real competitor games that you're afraid of that might actually close the gap and you know, take some of the spotlight and play to earn?
You know, for years in the Axie community, we've been wondering, when is the competitor going to arise? When are we going to have some true competition? And it's just never happened. I welcome it because, you know, we're building in a digital space, and that means there's room for as much as you can imagine. In terms of people on Twitter saying, yeah, my game's going to be better than Axie, this or that, like, the vested interest is very strong there, and I think there also may be some impressions farming or something, you know, engagement farming going on with that. But yeah, in terms of other games coming out, I'll reserve judgment for when I can play them, because unless they're using Axie's almost exact economic model, I have no idea if it's going to work or not. And I think many of them will fail. We're going to see a lot of other games that try to create their own player-owned, play-to-earn economy. And, you know, just the unfortunate truth is I think many will collapse. And we've already seen many games that picked up some, you know, notable traction, and they don't really exist anymore. So,
Yeah.
you know, I'm holding my breath. I'm hoping and praying that some other really interesting models arise where, you know, they can learn from Axie and Axie can learn from them. I think this is a space where collaboration beats out competition every time. And yeah, well, I'm waiting patiently, but man, you know, the games that I'm seeing right now, I'll have to play to decide.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to that time element, right? It's really hard to replicate a long-term economy. And not that it's easy, but it is relatively easy to make a successful economy in the short term because, as we've seen from all these, exchange clones, like Pancake Swap has a pretty good model. There's all these Pancake Swap clones, and a lot of them they're successful for like the first month, right? Like look at Polycat. It pumps. Then they get close to the cap. They have to take the rewards down. Once the pump is done, the dump ensues, and it takes a nosedive, and then it kind of has this turbulent level out until it gets pretty damn close to zero in most cases, right? Depending on how much of the market they're able to lock up. So I say that as just a comparable, like it's pretty easy in the first month to pump up the rewards and get people really excited. It's like, wow, this game's crazy profitable. What's hard is calibrating that faucet to maintain people's interest as you reduce the rewards to level out the economy and make it more sustainable. And then you have this like long flatline period that you got to ride out where that's like the 3 years of community building that we've got under our belts from the bear market. That is the part that I think is a really, really big challenge for these games trying to create new economies. Like I don't really know what the answer is to solve that.
I think a lot of the creators coming in, and I applaud them for coming in trying to create a game, but I think some are really here for the long term, but others are underestimating, that pain that you will feel when your community just isn't growing. And I believe Jiho has said, like, there were days when he woke up and no one had said a word since he went to sleep, and that hurts. And it does. It didn't really feel good for me as a mod either, and I'm sure for Trung it wasn't his favorite feeling. But I think people underestimate the absolute grind you have to go through, where you're not going to have anyone looking at you, and you've just got to keep going. I've seen people post that they were working on project X, Y, or Z, and they quit because they weren't getting any attention. And it's like, well, you're not just going to blow up in a month. It may take years before you're successful. And this is nothing unique to crypto.
Yeah.
I think this is something that has always held true. If you're starting something new, you're going to have to grind hard and not get adoption for potentially a long time. And, for those builders who are joining the space now and have the wherewithal to go through that, I applaud them. And, I hope all the builders have that kind of fortitude, but so I think there are also a lot of people underestimating how incredible of a thing Axie is and how it's been built, and underestimating how long it will take to actually have it done.
Yep.
Axie's nowhere near close to done, and it's been 3 years. If you're getting into this space seriously as a builder for a play to earn game, play to earn economy, you're not talking about a 3-year commitment. You're talking about a decade commitment.
You got to be
talking about a 2-decade commitment. You got to be long. You got to be long as anybody. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
It's not easy.
It as maybe another sort of supplementary to that, maybe a good way to round out this conversation. I think as an outsider, it's really easy to underestimate the community power that Axie has, to write it off just as, well, people want to make money. That's cool. Once real games come out, they're going to ditch. And I mean, Jiho has tweeted this so many times, but it is so much like the play to earn aspect is huge and it is a key driver of growth. But the community element is also huge. Like you have whole families, whole friend circles that are rallying behind these. Like a lot of these smaller scholarship funds that have been started up recently, it's as local community as it gets. It's actual like that. My sister, my cousin's friend. It's like these local, kind of buddy system scholarships that are forming, and that's like really powerful. We see the pictures of these, LAN parties of people all grinding together and strategizing together and helping each other, and like those bonds get forged. Those aren't the kind of people that are just going to jump ship and jump to the next game and say, hey, wow, I got this really cool rare sword. Now I'm going to play this game. See you later, Axie. I'm dumping my assets. Because I think the next step of what I'm describing here is that people start to become attached to their Axies. And
Absolutely.
this sounds so stupid and so ridiculous to somebody that doesn't play Axie. I can see some of my Dota followers listening to this right now going, what do you mean you're attached to it? Some of my investment friends that are all about the quick gains and don't understand the emotional side. That question of, would you ever sell your Mystic? Is there a price? And I said, if I could sell Soraya for 100 ETH right now, I don't think I would do it, because I feel like that's part of my avatar. That's part of my identity. It would feel like a betrayal to Coco to flip it like that. It would feel like a betrayal of my own identity to sell this Axie to see it in the hands of someone else. And yeah, that's my Mystic. But if I'm somebody who was onboarded by one of my relatives, I was lucky enough to become a scholar. I have these Axies, and I've made I fed myself because of these Axies grinding over the course of months. You really do feel attached to them like they're a pet. You get a dopamine hit when you wake up and open up that game and look at it and go, look how cute this thing is. Similar to when you see your dog, see your cat. You can't touch it. You don't get the same tactile hit, but there is some crossover there. And people do get attached to these freaking things. So don't underestimate it, man. People don't want to part with their Axies, especially when it becomes a part of your daily life.
I'd feel so hollow if I sold number 44 or my Mystic Bug, or I don't know, my triple Mystic. It just would not feel right. And okay, now I have a lot of money, but I lost something that I can never get back. And that's the thing with many Axies and Mystics. Like once it's gone, you're gonna have to find something new, because the person who did buy it, they have that same emotional attachment now, and they're not inclined to sell it either. So, and as it goes to the outsiders looking in, I think the cryptocurrency community is really, it's all on Twitter and Discord. But the Axie community, the Facebook community is so huge, and the incredible things being shared on there, which I don't even have vision to. Like I don't use Facebook, so I can't even see it. But yeah. So if I can't see it, and like so many people have no clue about the huge Facebook communities and the incredible stories being shared there, and images and everything. So as an outsider, it's almost impossible to get a full picture. Even as an insider, it's impossible to get a full picture now. The community is so huge. So yeah, you just cannot underestimate it, but a lot of people do.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe we could summarize this episode with not financial advice, but don't short AXS. I don't think that's a good idea.
Yes.
Just that's like maximum risk for pretty low reward. There's plenty of other things you could be shorting. Please don't waste your hard-earned money. Yeah, that's exactly, worthy things. There you go. A better way to frame it. Artic, man, I feel like we could go on forever. I'd love to have a follow-up conversation with you sometime about governance stuff, because I had one of my notes on here. One of the things with land, ever since Geo's Constitution tweet, I've been thinking about like Axie politics. I've actually had some thought experiments in my head of trying to frame the Axie universe. Like, are we capitalistic? Are we socialistic? Are we communistic? Are we some new crossover? Are we this like weird layered sandwich that kind of interfaces with different parts of these different systems? Do we need to just come up with a new vernacular to describe our sort of economic system that's going to be born? Who's writing this constitution? Who's signing this constitution? Like advertising, there's going to be advertising in Lunacia. How do we come up with the rules for that? It's not going to be ultimate freedom, right? We're not going to be okay with pornography being advertised there. Surely there's going to be some limits, right? So where are those lines? Who draws those lines, right? That's when you say like censorship resistant, it's like awesome, but we might still want to self-govern to have some reasonable censorship, right? Like we wouldn't want to have black market drug sales advertised, for example. That's something we wouldn't want in our community. Somebody might try to do that. Freedom ain't free, man. And I think we could do a whole nother hour kind of dissecting what that shit really looks like and what it could mean potentially.
Honestly, when it comes to Axie, you can talk all day and you haven't touched everything, right?
Yeah.
It's just incredible. But yeah, I'd love to come back on in the future and talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, dude. Well, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate everything you've been doing on Twitter. You and the other Axie OGs. I appreciate everything you guys have done for the community. For new guys like me coming in and being able to pick up the torch where you guys have already moved it so far. I can't thank you enough, and looking forward to continue building this ship together, dude. This conversations like these always have me walking away feeling like extra motivated, like I need to turn off this stream and get right back to building.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm so excited to see how the esports scene grows and what you do with that. Axie esports, it's already big and it's going to be huge.
Yeah, we've got a lot of proposals to go through. This week for me is going to be mostly in the books, just dissecting proposals and then working some scheduling magic to figure out how many events we can support in the coming months with this special whitelist server. So, yeah, a lot on my plate this week, but looking forward to it, man. So much enthusiasm out there. The future is bright. I can tell you that for sure. Folks, give him a follow. He's Axie44 on Twitter. I think that's the main social media where you're spouting these days. Anything else to plug?
Yep.
Do you have a website or a blog or anything else like that? When are we going to get the Artic podcast, dude? I feel like you could totally do it. You've got the brain for it.
I've had people ask me that before, and maybe in the future, I guess a shout out. I have 2 scholars right now, and
Dude, nice.
sometime in the future, I will be opening up my scholarship for more scholars. So, yeah, other than that, I just want to shout out the Axie community. There are so many creators out there who I barely even know or have never talked to, who have a huge following now and are doing incredible things. So to everyone out there, if I haven't talked to you before, like, keep up the good work, everybody. We are changing the future here. We are making the future here.
We really are. 50% of these new players coming in have never used crypto before. Some like 20%.
It's just astounding.
I think have like barely used like banking systems before. So like Axie is quickly becoming more than a game. We're becoming an on-ramp for people to understand this new financial future. And that's powerful stuff, man. It really is.
I totally agree.
All right. Well, thank you again, my friend. I'll let you get out of here. I'm going to host somebody up and then make some lunch before my afternoon interview. So take care, buddy. Hopefully we'll be in touch again soon. We're connected on Discord now. So if you ever want to just catch up off stream, you know where to find me.
Okay. Yeah. And thank you very much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cheers.